Topo Athletic is committed to lifelong health and better movement. Topo builds running shoes for those who get out there every day regardless of weather, speed, energy, or mood. Their distinctive fit and feel combines instinctive human movement with modern performance and lightweight comfort to help you keep going, keep trying, and keep moving. Discover the Topo difference and step into a run experience unlike any other.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 55th episode of the Run, Try, Bike Fireside Chats. Today we're going to be chatting with Katie Odell, who recently ran her first marathon at the Gettysburg Blue-Gray Marathon. I'm going to be joined by co-owner Om Gandhi, Katie, and hopefully very soon the writer of the article, Hollie Sick, at Fueled by LOL. So hopefully she'll be able to join us to join in on this conversation and sort of get her view of and her perspective of Katie's training since she was interviewing her, like from the writer's perspective. So we're pretty excited to get that going. So I'm inviting Om and I'm inviting Katie to join us on this conversation, and hopefully it goes as smoothly as the practice session did. And it did. What perfect timing.
Hi.
So audience, this is Katie Odell, who was an awesome participant in a series of interviews that we have on our website. You can check them out at runtrimag.com. Hollie Sick interviewed Katie during about 3 to 4 months leading up to her first marathon at the Gettysburg Blue-Gray Marathon, which was 2 weeks ago, Katie?
April 30th.
So a week ago, a little over a week ago. Perfect. So really quick question for you, because this will kind of determine how well this interview goes. So no pressure.
Okay.
You're on the East Coast, so I hope I know your answer. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
No.
Yes! This is going to be the best interview.
Will I get
yes,
but that it is not my preference. No. I am from 30 miles outside of New York City, so that's kind of a sin.
See? Thank you. You hear that, Om? It's a sin. It's a sin to put that into your onto your pizza.
A lot of people on our chat beg to differ, but I agree to disagree.
All right, perfect. Hollie, just in time.
I figured it out.
Hi.
Hollie, you're from the East Coast too, so the question goes back to you as well. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? Don't get this wrong.
Oh no. I'm different though. But I like it. Oh, my confession is I like it, okay?
Yeah.
It's not my favorite type of pizza, but I will tolerate it.
See, Jason, one of us.
Okay.
West Coast best school.
Katie said it right.
Maybe.
Katie said it right. It's a sin to put pineapple on pizza.
Oh no. Okay, I'll leave now.
I'll eat it, but not supposed to be there.
So thank you both for joining. I think it's going to be a really cool conversation because we're going to talk to Katie about, her progress to her first marathon, which was a little over 10 days ago. And then Hollie, want to kind of get your perspective on being the person that interviewed Katie during this process, because you kind of saw it from a different angle throughout the 3 to 4 months that you were talking to her. So Katie, we'll start with you. In terms of the selection of this marathon, why did you pick this particular marathon to be your first marathon?
So largely because I am a pessimist, and I did not think that I would actually be able to complete the training. So I didn't want to put sort of the effort and money into, say, a distance race, right? To go have to travel or take a super long car ride, have a multiple night hotel stay. So I figured, I was looking at local marathons, and Gettysburg is maybe an hour and a half away from me. So I figured, great, it's not a super expensive race. It's not expensive to travel there. Let's sign up for it. And then if the training goes to crap, not the end of the world. It's not a huge investment on my part. So that was kind of why I picked that one. It had nothing to do with the course. It was really solely location for me.
So you had done a number of half marathons, and Hollie pointed out in articles a PR of 1:48. Why not stick to half marathons? Why jump to the marathon distance?
So, and I actually asked my husband this when I started talking about wanting to do this. So I'm obviously, I have a background in college athletics, I love sports. I love competition. So I watch our kids at track meets, or I watch the Boston Marathon, and I watch the people cross the finish line. And I think that has to be the best feeling in the world, to do all of that training and then cross the finish line. And I wanted that feeling. So I asked my husband, and he's not really into sports, but I've turned off sports, and I've asked him, so that desire doesn't cross your mind when you watch these events. It doesn't really cross your mind that, hey, this is something I want to do. And he looked at me, he goes, no. And well, it does for me. I see those people cross the finish line, and I want to feel what they feel. So that's why, and I figure the marathon is kind of, for me, was the big bucket list item. I know there's ultras out there or triathlons, but that didn't appeal to me. It was really the marathon for me that I wanted to tackle for myself. I didn't know that my body would let me, but I wanted to try. And that's why I jumped from the half marathon to hopefully and eventually completing a marathon.
Awesome. Hollie, did you know about the Gettysburg Blueberry Marathon before you started talking to Katie about her go at this training and racing?
So I knew of the race. My husband is actually from Chambersburg, so it's maybe an hour away from there. I knew it existed, but that's like all I knew. I know my father-in-law is obsessed with the half there. He loves it, but I didn't know much about the marathon. And it wasn't until like the last interview I did with Katie that she was like, oh, it had 1,500 feet of elevation gain. And like, I've done New York and LA, and both of those only have like 900, and I was dying. So I was so unwell when she was like, oh yeah, it had 1,500 feet of elevation gain.
Katie, did you know that before?
No.
Like the last?
Nope. I knew it had, I believe, I researched a bit of it, and I believe someone said, yeah, it has like rolling hills. If you train on hills, you'll be fine. No. I knew it wasn't flat, so I absolutely knew that, but I did not know exactly what I was in for when I signed up.
Yeah, rolling hills has got to be the worst description any race director can put on their description, right? It's like, have you ever run a race that has actually rolling hills? No, 9 times out of 10, you're going up like a 6% grade.
Well, and where are you from? Because Iowa's rolling hills are very different from Pennsylvania's rolling hills,
yeah.
which are from mountains. So it's all very relative. So no, I was not expecting a flat course, but I was absolutely not expecting the course that I ran.
Did you, but so without expecting flat, was did your training include hill training and running, do hill repeats and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it did. So I think my 20 miler only had about 500 feet. But that was also a little bit conscious at the end when I felt like I was dying, and I was just doing sort of mile repeats of a semi-flat thing just to get my 20 miles in. So nothing around here is totally flat. It's absolutely nothing like Gettysburg, but it is not flat. So nothing I ran was flat during any runs, and I did. So it was a 16-week training block. And I did alternating sort of every other week, a little bit of a speed work and then a hill workout. So I was certainly prepared. I was certainly training on hills. It just was not the kind of hills that the course had.
Gotcha. So go ahead.
The mountains.
Yes, not hills. They're really mountains, but.
Hollie, when you were interviewing her, were you looking and talking to her about her training and what she was doing and thinking to yourself, since you're familiar with the area, like, yeah, this is good training for that course?
So I'm like semi-familiar with the area, and I'm just like, okay, so she lives in PA, the race is in PA. I'm sure like the terrain is the same, which is like not a good way to think of it. I mean, Philly is not the same as like Pittsburgh, so.
So
I passed one guy on the course who said, I didn't think it would be this hilly. I just texted my girlfriend that if I don't cross the finish, she needs to just drive the loop of the race course and find me. Because I didn't make the 6-hour cutoff because he was not prepared either.
As if we haven't been there before, all of us.
Oh, for sure.
you mean like
Yeah.
Indians went home laying on the side of the trail? And I was like, I'm done. Come pick me up.
Yeah, but trails are hard. You have to take like an ATV to come out and pick you up or something.
This is not an interview about me, but yeah, I had to that was trying to get through the trails at Canyons 100 and couldn't drive through part of the section because it just was so rough. Like, it just couldn't make it. Had to turn around.
Well, that's why I don't want to do an ultra. There we go.
Well, Katie, I was going to ask you, has your husband ever seen, finish line photos of people finishing 100 milers, 200 milers? And is he thinking to himself, well, that looks like fun?
No, I think the course I did was a 2-loop course. And at the halfway point, I think I looked at him and said, I can't do this. And that was only the halfway point. So no, I don't think anything longer than a marathon's ever crossed either of our minds.
So is there zero chance we're going to convince him to be the next guest for Hollie to interview for his training for a marathon then?
0% chance.
-5%.
Yeah. If I could do
I love it. What part of the training did you find that you were just like, man, I love this and I'm glad it's on my schedule over and over again? Besides rest.
So I actually enjoyed, I've never really done significant mileage before my workday started. So I would do 5 or 6 miles, before my workday started. And that was kind of the max that I did. So the training plan I followed called for many, many weeks in a row of maxing out sort of at 8 miles training run. And just given my job and my life, it had to be done before work started. And so I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to finish that, which stunk at the time when the alarm went off. But the feeling I had for the rest of the day was kind of tremendous, right? Like, I ran 8 miles. That felt good. And I got myself ready for work. And I'm at work and I'm doing a good job. And then I'm going home and making dinner. Like, it just made my day feel really productive to do that many miles before work. And sometimes I depend on the week and how I was feeling, but those 8 miles would be a workout. And that made me feel kind of extra superhuman that I was able to do all of that and then carry on with the rest of my day. Getting up at 4 a.m. never got easier ever. So I wouldn't say I enjoyed the wake up. But being able to accomplish all of that in one day felt really, really good.
Awesome. For those of you that are just joining us, my name is Jason Bahamundi. I'm the founder and one of the co-owners of Run Try Bike, being joined by my other co-owner, not former, he's still here, Om Gandhi, as well as Katie Odell and Hollie Sick. Hollie did a 4-part series on Katie's journey to her first marathon, which took place about 10 days ago at the Gettysburg Blue-Gray Marathon. If you have questions for Katie and her training and the race, which I still don't know the results of, so I'm kind of excited to get to that part, feel free to type it in the comments or tap a little question mark on the bottom of the screen and ask away, and we'll make sure we get to that. Hollie, this question's for you. So we just asked Katie about, what was the best part of her training. What did you find to be the most interesting part of writing this series of articles about Katie's path to her first marathon?
So it's always cool to see someone just doing something new, because like every time I would talk to Katie, it would be like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the marathon. And then she would get a little bit more confident, like, oh, I just crushed this run. And like, even when she had a couple of like not great runs, which we all do, like she was like, I'm here at the marathon. I'm ready to go. So it was like kind of cool to see her confidence grow in that distance, because it's just 26.2 miles is so long, So like if you've done a half, like a marathon is not like 2 halves. It's like 3 halves, maybe 4.
It's definitely exponential. There's no doubt about it. Definitely exponential. What part, outside of the early wake-up calls, Katie, for those 8-mile runs before work, what part of training were you like, this again? Like, why do I have to keep doing this?
So I was really tired, which is to be expected. So I had this sort of, now looking at it, lofty goal of 4 days a week of running, 2 days of lifting, and then a rest day. And I had wanted those 2 days of lifting to be full body lift. And as the training went on, I was tired. My body was tired. And so those 2 days of full body lifting turned into 1 day of full body lifting and 1 day of just upper body and core. And maybe that impacted me, during the race because it was so hilly. Maybe my lower body could have been stronger, but I was kind of, especially for my first marathon with my only goal to be the finish, was to kind of listen to what my body was saying. And I was just really tired. So I erred on the side of caution for almost everything with this training cycle. And I think the strength training took a hit. And I've done CrossFit in the past. Like, I'm super into weight training and strength training, and I didn't want it to take a hit. But that was kind of the one thing that I'd had to kind of go by the wayside for this training cycle.
So I know when Hollie, you and I talked about, putting this series together, I gave you sort of loose guidelines. Like, we want to find somebody who's doing their first something so that we can follow their journey. How did you come about getting in touch with Katie and engaging her in conversation to be the subject of this interview segment?
So I asked on Instagram and she messaged me so quickly, and I was like, oh, this is so perfect. And then I knew kind of about Blue Gray Marathon. So I was like, oh, this is even more interesting to me. And then I told my father-in-law that he was invested in your training. He didn't do the race this year. But he's like, oh, that's so cool. But, he didn't tell me it was Hilly, which I kind of need to talk to him about that.
So during the green room conversation, Katie, we sort of talked on this a little bit. We touched on eating disorders and how they impact a lot of athletes at our level, right? Which is, for lack of a better phrase, hobby joggers. And you said you were very open to discussing this. So if you wouldn't mind some background on your eating disorders and how it played an impact in both the training and the racing of the event for you.
Yes. So I would say probably about my sophomore or junior year of college, I developed a pretty severe eating disorder. So it was severe food restriction and a lot of over exercising. And so I'm not going to give specifics in terms of weight, but I was 30 pounds lighter than I currently am. And so that created just a whole host of issues. I loved exercising. It became sort of an addiction, which is the bad part of it. But the sort of catch-22 was that I found out that I really loved running. So it was hard to sort of balance the benefits of running to the negative aspect of running too much or working out too much. So I'd say for a good 10 years, I definitely battled an eating disorder. I had after my very first half marathon, in retrospect, I did not give myself enough time to recover. And so I developed a pelvic stress fracture from that. And that was solely based on my eating disorder. I think at the time when I did the bone density scan, they said I had, the bone density of someone who was 60. And I was at the time 28. And then combined with the fact that I have some mild scoliosis in my spine, I've always sort of been imbalanced. My hips always give me problems. And so that always prevented me, I think, from training as much as I wanted to. So I've done 3 half marathons. Everyone has been progressively faster, which is great. But for every half marathon I've trained for, there've been a few more that I just haven't been able to do because of injury. And so I was very hesitant to commit to saying that I would do this marathon, because I just didn't think that my body would allow me to do it. It took years. I did therapy. I did physical therapy to also get my hips and my glutes to where they needed to be so that I wouldn't get injured. But ever since my first stress fracture, I've been hyper aware of every sort of twinge. For this training cycle specifically, I erred on the side of caution every single time I felt a twinge. Fortunately, I only missed like 2 or 3 runs, which is really not a lot. But I was always hyper aware of the previous damage I did to my body, and if I'm still feeling the repercussions of that. I also, we had mentioned before we started this, it's very difficult to be in this type of hobby and not want to be the lightest weight that you can be, because it's just science. The lighter you are, the faster you run. And I had to sort of realize that I'm at the place now where I need to adjust my goals. And so I may never run a 1:48 half marathon again. I might, I don't know. But my goal right now is just to be healthy and to get through the training blocks and to sort of cross that finish line. And I wish that my disordered eating hadn't sort of done that to my body, but it did, and that's where I am, and that's fine. And I crossed the finish line of a marathon, so that is just proof that you can do it. But unfortunately, I'm now just hyper aware of the impact it's had on my body.
Thank you for such an in-depth answer to a sensitive topic. I really appreciate it. And like I mentioned in the green room as well, I've dealt with an eating disorder myself, and to the the starvation component of racing Ironman distance, and the lighter I am, the faster I will be, and getting past that, moving into something else. So Hollie, I'm going to put this question on you. Knowing Katie's battles with her eating disorder, did that change your approach to asking her questions, because it is a sensitive topic and we don't know how people will react to questions like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I first talked to Katie off the bat, she was very open about talking about it. But I actually used to work in public health with people with eating disorders. And obviously not everyone is like that. Eating disorders thrive in silence. So I was definitely careful, but I was appreciative that Katie was super open with just chatting about her history and how fueling would affect it. Because I mean, it's hard to take, 500, 600 calories while you're running 26.2 miles or more, of course. But
yeah, it is. So it's interesting, right? To have that perspective from the journalist, right? To be like, how do I ask this question about fueling? How are you fueling? And I have the interviews up on my laptop next to me, and I can see, right, we're talking about fueling and stuff like that. For you, Katie, being able to respond to Hollie's questions about that stuff, was there any sort of triggering moments, or was it like, this is what I'm doing and this is what I need to do to get to the marathon, so I'll answer these questions?
Yeah, so I think, my main goal, and I really wasn't lying, was to finish. And I think I knew that, yes, if I weighed a little bit less, maybe I would finish faster. But seeing as that was my only goal, I focused a lot less on those kind of numbers, right? If I needed to do a 20 miler, I did it. It didn't really matter at the time. Weighing less, weighing more, I just wanted to do the 20 milers, and then I wanted to do the marathon. There were certainly moments where I thought, maybe if I weighed less, this would be a little bit easier right now. But then I would tell myself, but if you weighed less, you probably wouldn't be fueling properly, and it wouldn't feel good. So it was a little bit of a mental battle, but for me, it really helped that my only goal was to finish. And so I knew the fueling was important. I tried not to pay attention to calories. I really didn't. I paid attention to hunger cues. And I think that helped. Maybe if I was trying to do multiple marathons, or I don't know, but because this was my only goal in mind, was to finish, I was going to do whatever I could to cross that finish line. And I knew that starving myself certainly wasn't going to help. I also knew that if I starved myself, maybe I would be faster in this marathon, and then maybe I would wind up with a stress fracture and then not be able to run for 3 months. And for me, my mental health absolutely relies on running. So I did not want to damage myself I did not want to injure myself doing this. I didn't want to cross the finish line and then wind up with a stress fracture and not run. To me, that wasn't worth it. That was kind of my approach through the whole training cycle was, yes, finish, but do it so that you continue to run after this is over and not have to take a lengthy break.
I think that's a really important topic as well, right? Where we see the everyday athlete who's like, if I keep training, the harder I train, the faster I train, the stronger I train, the better I will be at this stuff. And then they get injured and are unable to participate for 3, 6, maybe even years. Yeah. Was your mentality going even into those half marathons, like, I'm not going to risk injury by running an additional mile or two, or did you have a different mindset and it's changed as you progressed in sport?
Yeah, I didn't know what I didn't know when I was running my first couple of half marathons. So after my first one, I think I said my goal was sub 2 hours, right? It was sort of arbitrary. It sounded good. I ran a 150, felt great. I think the minute the soreness went away, which was probably in, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, I was back to running. And that's how I wound up with my first stress fracture. And it felt like a gunshot going through my pelvis. I mean, it was so painful, but I didn't know what it was. I'd never had a stress fracture, never thought about it. It didn't cross my mind. And so ever since then, I have been far more cautious with what I'm putting my body through, whether it's a half marathon and now a marathon, was that you really need the proper rest. So I've been it was 10 days ago. I've been feeling great for probably the last week. There's really been no soreness, a little bit tired, but nothing major. I've not let myself run, and I probably won't run until maybe Friday or this weekend. And that's because of what happened during my first half marathon, where I felt great and I ran too soon. And then I was laid off for many, many months. And that's not what mentally I need, is to be laid off from running. It really is more of a mental outlet for me than anything else. So that's how I approached every race I did following that first half marathon, where I really just didn't give my body enough time. And I didn't know that I needed to give it more time to recover.
Hollie, I see you nodding your head a lot to what Katie was just saying, and you have a post, and I appreciate you putting it out there very often, which is, never miss a Monday is a stupid concept, right?
Oh my, yes. I see so many people, they're like running the next day after a marathon, or 2 days after a marathon. And really, you're not going to do yourself any favors. Like, you see the elite athletes, they take like a week off from marathon training, and some even 2 weeks. Like, if the elite runners who are making their full-time income off of running are taking 1 to 2 weeks off, why aren't we, the hobby joggers, doing the same thing? Like, you don't need to continuously run year round. Like, you do need to take rest. And I've had my fair share of overuse injuries in my early 20s. Like, I was not smart about my training, and it's because I, ran hard all the time, never took breaks, and I got a couple of stress fractures.
Yeah, and Ohm, chime in about, your ability to take rest in these days, because I know for me, it's become a massively important part of training, which is, you know what? I don't feel like doing this today because I'm tired. So guess what? I'm going to sit on the couch.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was just saying, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I was like probably just like really dumb, with like my decisions, like running all the time and going nonstop. And I don't think I've ever been more in tune with just listening to my body. And that actually brings me to a question for Katie. And I think one of the things we did mention is we have a lot of beginners in our audience. And that's, when you look at things as a whole, I think one of the things that people do is we kind of look at running in a vacuum sometimes, and not as something, as a balanced part of our lives. So what is your advice on, like, for example, if you've had a stressful day at work, do you go as far as like cutting back your runs, or like if you didn't sleep well, if you're stressed, how do you balance all the components of your life into your training? And I'd be curious to hear what Hollie has to say about that too, as far as like your training.
Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit harder when I shifted to marathon training, because I went from 3 runs a week to 4 runs a week. And that doesn't seem like a big shift, but for me, it gave me a little bit less flexibility, right? So if I had one crappy night of sleep, that sort of shifted everything. And then it shifted, the weight training or family commitments and what I had to do for the weekend, right? So that was hard for me to balance all of that. I think for me in particular, it was a 16-week training block. I kind of every morning, I'm sorry, but when the alarm goes off at 4:30, I don't think anyone wants to get up. So my sort of refrain was, okay, but this is for 16 weeks. This is not for the rest of your life. And you can get up at 4:30 in the morning. You'll be fine. But there were certain days where if I had a very late night at work, an unexpectedly late night, I either skipped a run or I simply shifted it, or it got cut in half. Again, because I had very sort of reasonable expectations and I just wanted to cross that finish line, I knew that missing one run or cutting one run a couple miles short was not going to be the end of the world. And I think I gave myself a lot more grace than I normally would have, because as someone who's a very type A, I don't give myself a lot of grace or leeway. But I didn't really have a ton of do or die expectations for this race. And I was willing to give myself that flexibility during those 16 weeks. And again, every time the alarm went off, if there was no real viable reason, I would tell myself it's just for a few months and I can do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here and like, it's funny, I'm sitting here in a taper before I go off to my next race. And shortly after I started my taper, I got really sick and had an infection from the bottom down in my chest. And I'm like, oh, cool, forced taper, you know? But like, you know, if you asked me a year ago, I would have tried to like force a run or something instead of realizing like, man, there's not much you can, the hay's already in the barn. There's not much you can do for your fitness at this point, and your body can fight a battle on two fronts, especially if you're stressed about work or stressed about, you know, didn't sleep well. So it's really awesome hearing you say that. I'm going to turn that question over to you, Holly.
Type B personality, but I really tried to have that approach during this training cycle.
No, I'm a type A personality too, so I totally get it. I'm still working on it.
As you get closer, you forget about that stuff. You're like, nah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, so for me, the number one reason I take a rest day is because I did not get enough sleep. I don't function well on enough sleep. I'm even a nice person when I don't get enough. I certainly don't run when I don't get enough. Stressful days at work, I have a lot of them, it seems like. I mean, it feels like everyone does all the time. But I don't know. I usually almost always run before work because I mean, I live in the Mojave Desert. It's about to be 120 degrees here, so I'm not running in the afternoon. So I usually run before work, and then I find when I get stressed at work, man, I just come home and I just watch TV. I don't want to deal with anyone. So I think if I ran after work, I'd probably deal with it differently.
Awesome. For those of you that are just joining us, my name is Jason Bahamundi. I'm the founder of Run Try Bike. I'm being joined by co-owner Om Gandhi. We're talking to Katie Odell and Hollie Sick. Katie just ran her first marathon at the Gettysburg Blue Gray Marathon about 10 days ago, and Hollie journaled her path to that marathon. You can find it on our website, runtrymag.com, under the running tab. If you search for Hollie's name on our site, you'll find the articles that are relating to Katie's story of getting to her first marathon. So, Katie, I know, we've got some pictures from the first post with family members, support that you received from parents and husband. What was that like to help you get to the marathon start line?
Yeah, so I think I've run one and a half marathon since I met my husband. And, he was there at the finish line. It was great. But in the back of my mind, it was always like, hey, I think I want to do a marathon. So I don't know why it popped into my mind this particular last, whatever it was, 6 months. But I said, I think I'd like to try it. And being the pessimist that I am, that I couched it to him by saying, I'd like to try to train for a marathon. I don't think it'll happen, so don't worry. But if I do, I had printed out my training schedule and I put it on the fridge, right? And I couldn't ask for a better support system. He doesn't run. He has no interest in running. My stepdaughters are 11 and 7. They have zero interest in running. So it was kind of I felt like a very selfish endeavor on my part, because it was kind of just a bucket list. I don't really have a bucket list. That's probably the only thing on it. But I felt like it was a selfish endeavor. And I said, well, look, if I do this, here's what it's going to look like on, for many, many Sundays in a row, I'm going to be out for hours at a time. I'm going to come home. I'm going to be cranky. I'm going to sleep all afternoon. And he was nothing but 100% supportive. He had my water bottles out by the sidewalk for me. I would text him in the middle of the run and say, I can't do this. I want to come home. I think at one point I stopped home to use the bathroom, and he met me, and I said, I wish I could cry, but I'm too dehydrated to cry. And, you know, he sort of gave me a pat in the back and said, well, what can I do? And I know you can do this, Katie. So I literally could not have asked for a better support system. It was difficult, however, doing the training on my own. I'm not again, complete introvert. I've never needed to train with anyone, but those long runs were brutal by myself. And I think that absolutely would have helped if I'd had someone else who was running, not even necessarily side by side with me, but just a half mile ahead or behind, or just someone who was doing the same kind of training cycle that I was. When I sort of had the idea in my head of doing this, I thought, oh, well, my husband has a bike. He could kind of sort of cycle with me, but then he had rotator cuff surgery. So that wasn't going to happen. So at that point, I realized I really, truly was on my own. But then I'd say it was late December, very early New Year, I was hospitalized with some pretty severe migraines that wouldn't stop. And that beginning of December is when I had put it in my head that, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a marathon. So when this happened in mid to late December and January, I was devastated. I was thinking, they can't figure out the answers to this. There's no way I can run right now. So the minute that we kind of figured out what was going on and I realized I would be able to run again, I told myself, it doesn't matter what support, like if no one can run with you or bike with you, it doesn't matter. You should be thankful now that you can run. Because in mid-December, I didn't think I'd be able to really be able to do this training cycle. So that was kind of on repeat in my head when I was running by myself for those long runs and it sucked. I was like, well, it could be worse. I could not be running at this point, which is where I thought I would have been in December.
It's so interesting, this sport, right? So you don't like the long run on your own. I love the long run on my own and would need people for shorter runs to be with me, to keep me company, because I'm an ultra runner at this point, and running 100 miles is like, cool, I can be out there by myself for 100 miles. I need somebody to run with me for 6 miles because it's only going to be like an hour, right? Like I need that support for that. But 24 hours, I'm good on my own. It's so weird. So we've danced around the topic the whole time. Finish. What was it like crossing your first finish line? What was that feeling?
It was relief. And I had hoped it would be more joy and ecstasy, but it was relief because it sucked. You know, I thought, Katie, your only goal is to finish. When you cross that finish line, you should be ecstatic no matter what your time is. It doesn't matter. You crossed it. And it was just pure relief when I crossed it. There was zero joy. It was just relief when I crossed that line.
Did you hit the wall at any point during the marathon?
So the course was a 2-loop course. So I saw my husband at the midway point, at the half marathon point. And I believe I said to him, I can't do this anymore. And it was only the halfway point. So at the end, I didn't think I would get there because I said, I can't do this. I'm only halfway done. I've done half marathons before. I've never felt this crappy before. But so that I didn't think at that point it was pure frustration. And then when I crossed the finish line, it was still relief. Looking back on it now, I'm very proud, but at the moment it was just pure relief.
I'm laughing because I remember my first marathon and basically having muscles cramping that I didn't know existed. And I'm like, and it was like mile 18 and just like, how am I supposed to finish these last 8 miles at this point? Hollie,
I didn't feel the physical too much pain until about mile 20 when my hips locked up. Everything before that point when I was frustrated was purely mental. It was another hill. I can't do this. But I didn't hit the pain point until mile 20. That was the physical pain.
Hollie, what was your experience at your first marathon?
So my first 2 marathons, right, yeah. No, my first 3 marathons were like, okay, but it was like my fourth marathon, which was New York, that I really at mile 5 was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. Like, I really don't. And I'm like, I don't have any other options. So that fourth marathon I had in 2019, that was super rough. And I remember just like every step I was like, man, if I make it to the finish line, I deserve that medal today. Like, it was so rough. And I just, same sort of thing. Like, I cramped. It was like I never ran a marathon before. And I was sore for like days after that. I think I took like 2 or 3 months off of running after that because I was like, I'm done with this. But yeah, my first marathon actually was also New York, but I probably was a little bit overtrained when I went into that one, but also very happy that I finished. Every marathon, I'm like, somewhere around like mile 15 to 20, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to finish, but then somehow I do. And I'm like, wow, I am so relieved too.
And what about you?
You know, it's funny. In the 5 years I've been running, I still have not run a road marathon because the one I was signed up for got canceled due to COVID, and that's why I'm an ultra marathoner. And if I'm being totally honest, I got to give kudos to people who do road marathons because I'd still do 100 miles any day over a road race.
All the time. Like when people are like Hollie, you run 5Ks consistently, and I just think for me, all the pain in a 5K, and I don't care if it takes 25 minutes, 30 minutes, like that pain for that amount of time is way too much. I'd rather deal with the dull pain of, 24 hours later crossing a finish line.
Yeah, I'd get a quarter of a mile into a 5K on the road and be like, I can't do this. But if you get me signed up for a 100-miler, I'd be totally fine.
I think every 5K, I'm like a quarter of a mile and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is dumb.
So, Katie, you've had about 10 days. You said recovery is going well.
Yep.
Have you had any thoughts about what the future looks like for you in terms of running?
Yeah, I said at the halfway point, I can't do this. I'm never doing this again. And then when I crossed the finish, I repeated, I am never doing this again. Everyone at work asked, how was it? And I said, I'm never doing this again. I didn't enjoy the training and I didn't enjoy the race. But I'm also a runner and I'm a masochist. So I've now not totally ruled out another marathon. Nothing concrete. I have no idea when or what it will be. But I also realized I genuinely like the half marathon distance. The training suits me well. I find mentally when I get up over 11, 12 miles, I kind of fall apart. That's a mental thing. I suppose that's fixable. Maybe I'll go to therapy about that. I don't know, but I'm kind of happy. I do like long distances, but probably not super long distances. So I figured I despise running in heat. That's mainly why I honestly picked an April marathon. I did not want to train in the summer, but I've got the fitness right now. So maybe an early fall half marathon would be totally viable. We certainly have plenty in the area here where I am. And then maybe revisit maybe a marathon again in the spring next year. I also have to realize I got super lucky. We had no snowstorms. We had no ice. I mean, I could not have asked for a better winter in which to train. So that may never happen again. I have to take that into account. But perhaps next year. I don't know yet.
Well, let me know what race you decide to do, and I'll make sure not to register for it because every race I register for has the worst weather that race event has ever had in its history.
Apparently, I figured I paid for great weather during training to have really, really crappy weather on race day.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. We have some really fast, rapid fire questions that typically revolve all around food. So since athletes love their cakes and their snacks, this is what we focus on now. So Katie, we'll start with you. The first question is candy corn a real candy or is it just earwax coated in sugar?
Oh, no, it's candy.
Oh, no. You had the pizza question.
I'm a chocolate girl through and through. I love candy corn. Love it.
Hollie,
I love candy corn.
I love
it. I'm probably the only one in California that buys it, but that's okay.
As a Californian, I can confirm that.
Hollie, to you, Peeps, is that a real candy or is that just a dust ball covered in glitter?
Dust ball covered in glitter.
Yeah. Katie's nodding in agreement for sure.
I hate Peeps.
They're the worst. Like
I love glitter. I love glitter. I hate Peeps.
We've had people tell us that you should eat them stale. And then we've had one person tell us that you should put the toothpicks in their noses and put them in the microwave and watch them joust. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but okay.
Yeah, peep jousting. Was it put them in a microwave, stick toothpicks in them, and then they'll fight each other?
As they melt, I guess.
And shout out to Adina for sending Jason and I stale peeps to try, which were gross, by the way, but you know.
Katie, are you a fan of licorice?
Oh, gosh, no.
Okay, then it doesn't matter red or black.
I mean,
Hollie,
black makes me want to vomit. I'll digest red, but it's not my favorite.
Hollie, are you a fan of licorice?
0-star review.
Nice. Red velvet. Is that a real flavor or is it just chocolate cake with red food dye? Hollie?
It's real.
Oh, no.
I'm very adamant about that.
I think Hollie's the first person to say that too, which is a first on this chat in a whole year. It's real.
Hollie, Katie, you're shaking your head. No, it's not a real flavor.
Nope. It's made up.
Do you prefer, Katie, this to you, do you prefer cake or pie?
Oh, cake, 100%, because it has frosting.
Favorite cake flavor?
It doesn't matter as long as the frosting is chocolate.
Same. We are so right now.
Yeah, anything, frosting, honestly, any flavor of frosting, it doesn't matter what the cake is.
Carrot cake for me. And it has to, carrot cake with raisins is phenomenal.
Oh.
Yeah, it has a bit of sweetness to it.
Yeah.
So, Katie, to you, when you run, music, podcast, or nothing at all?
Podcast.
Oh, awesome. What's your favorite podcast that you listen to?
Small Town. It's a comedy podcast about murder, believe it or not. I listen to it. I've seen them live in person many times. It's tremendous. And it makes the runs go by pretty darn fast.
Hollie, same question to you.
So I'm a music person, but if I do workouts or races, I don't listen to anything.
So, Katie, I'm going to wrap this up because I've got your first article here with the picture of your two dogs. Am I hearing one of your dogs snoring?
Sorry, I didn't know that was audible. Yeah, 100%. That's one of my dogs. Background.
It's totally been audible.
I love dogs.
Sorry. Yeah, she is.
That's perfect.
I love it.
We'll amplify that on the podcast. So that
We love running, buddy.
Oh,
thank you guys both so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Hollie, thank you for taking the time to write these articles for us. And we're looking forward to this segment continuing with Dave and his first gravel race. Katie, congratulations on your first marathon. Thank you for allowing Hollie to interview and share your story with our readers and followers and joining us on this conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's awesome.
If you missed any of this, it'll be on our YouTube channel in a couple of days, as well as our website. And then probably in about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe longer than that, right, Om? Because you're going to be in Nepal doing your thing up and down mountains over there. It'll be on a podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Thank you guys for everything. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
thank you.